So David sent us an email a little while ago and said we're presenting to a committee about data. And so with Deanna being on her
7th,
as the calendar goes, your 13th day of work, but really, this weekend's and a 4th of July in there, so about a week. We decided to focus on something that's happening right now in our building.
Okay.
So we're sharing with you some information about summer programming. And you guys can jump in whenever you're ready. So at both JGS and RMS, we provide summer programming for learners that are students of ours from last year, with the exception of 5th graders, because now they're accessing summer programs through the middle high school. And with the exception of preschoolers, until you'll see on the next slide. We have 2 kinds of summer programs that are offered. There's PEP, which stands for Proficiency Enhancement Program, a somewhat outdated term that I think may evolve and change over time. But so PEP program, and then also extended school year services for students who have IEPs or receive related services, schools and services. All students that have an IEP do not qualify. We'll get to kind of how students are invited in for a moment, but the 2 programs really run seamlessly. Like, I think if you were not behind the scenes or didn't see the budget lines of who gets paid from which line or who students really are, when you come into both of the buildings and you see students, you wouldn't know who was here through an invitation through PEP or who was here through an invitation through ESY. Okay. Because their programming essentially looks the same. This year, our schedule is a little bit different because of where 4th of July fell. So our summer programming is lasting for 3 weeks. It's the same amount of face-to-face contact as previous years, which has always been 4. But where 4th of July came, it made it kind of wonky. So this year, we're inviting students into the building 4 days a week. So for a total of 12 days, and they're here from 8:30 till 12 for those 3 weeks of July. And we've just wrapped up our first week this week, and it's been really successful
wonderful.
in both buildings.
Good turnout.
Really yeah,
Good turnout.
Yeah,
It's nice to have kids back in the building.
yeah, for
That's
sure.
really cool.
Yeah. So I think the next slide really so how learners is selected. Does anybody else? Yeah.
I can talk about this. So again, I'm just coming on board, but I did some reading regarding our PEP and our ESY. And so at both schools, we use the same criteria to select learners to engage in this process. And so there's various reference points that include, but they're not just limited to teacher recommendations about performance in classroom, academically, behaviorally, and then results from state assessments, results from in-class assessments, as well as guardian recommendations. And then we take all that information and we put it on the table together when we look at all those data points to determine which students would most benefit from joining us for these 12 days. A few things that are important to acknowledge is that learners accessing ESY services are determined a little bit differently, and their eligibility is based on degree of impairment, which means the level at which their impairment impedes their ability to access their growth and their processing, the emergence of breakthrough skills. So if they're right on the precipice of kind of learning that new skill that's really important to their growth, they're also invited. And then evidence of substantial regression during past breaks. So you would look at February break, April break, any summer vacations, and look and say, is this a student that has shown regression historically? And those students are also recommended to join us for our summer time together. And then learners that are receiving Learning Center or Title I support during the school year are given priority. So if something is filling up fast, we look at the students that are receiving those services during the year that help them continue to grow and learn, and those students are given priority placement within the class sizes.
So you can see here, and Ashley, do you want to speak to this one, or do you want me to?
You can go. I can talk
Okay.
about the next one.
So you can see our students that are currently in preschool. It's their programming option is just through ESY. But where you see these grade levels here, these are the grade levels that students were enrolled in last year. So kindergarten are rising first graders, first grade rising second, and so on and so forth. So these are our combined numbers through both schools. So you can see sort of like anywhere between, like the low to mid 20s for each grade level have been invited, and then a pretty close number of people really accepting the invitation and responding and saying, yeah, we'd love to come, and see that pretty closely too with ESY. So the students that are identified to qualify, oftentimes it's almost all of them that are able to come. So that's really great. These numbers are great. At the end of the presentation, you'll see that our hope is to kind of extend and grow the program. We have to do that in line with the number of staff that we can secure in the summer too, but really wanting to kind of extend it and have the opportunity to include many more learners in some summer programming and kind of keeping that joy for school alive.
So we talk about what is the point of offering a summer program? You know, why do we want kids in the school for more time? And it's for a number of reasons. And I think, you know, looking ahead, as we've kind of alluded to, we would like to extend the invitation to even more children to have them take part in summer learning. But for now, loss of academic skills over the summers, often coined as summer slide, is something that's pretty real with certain kiddos. So if we can keep them engaged in learning and academic skills, there's been proof to show in data that they will lose less of their skills going on into the next school year, and then by the end of their elementary career. And then it allows learners who are struggling to get closer to or meet grade level expectations. And I would also say it also allows for kids to have connections with trusted adults in a safe and supportive environment for the summertime, which can be certainly a concern in some cases.
A piece of that too, Ashley, as well, is like we have some students who need the normalcy of school,
right.
And transitions can be difficult. And so if they can keep in that practice of getting up and getting ready and coming to school and being in school and following a structure, even if it's a shorter day for a shorter period of time, the transition back in the fall can be a little bit smoother for those learners, because it hasn't been such a large chunk of time where all of these familiar things have gone away.
Yes.
So the day is pretty action packed. So students at both schools arrive around 8:30. Here at RMS, we greet students outside. They play on the playground for a few minutes, and then we come in and start our day. That same collective group gathering happens at JGS, and you guys meet in the cafeteria, correct? And kind of come together as a community of learners and then go off. Each classroom, each group starts their day, much as we do in the school year, with a responsive classroom morning meeting. And then the rest of that morning chunk is really split into some learning time, whether that's core academics and instruction, project block. If you're a student and you're here for qualifying through ESY, you may be working with OT or PT or speech language as well and getting some of those services, some direct instruction. Everybody goes out to play, because that's important that they continue to practice those skills also. And then dismissal happens right around noon. In past years, we've been able to provide lunch during our summer programming, and that was through a connection that we had, correct, Ruben, with the Combal School District. But their program changed, and so we were sort of like gifted into the program that they had, and their program changed, and so therefore we no longer are able to provide meals to students, which is unfortunate.
Is there a way to change that just alone, or you have to be with another school?
So I don't know how that came to be, because that was already happening when I started here. But I think it was to do with some of the funding that Conval received. But then part of their agreement was they had to open it up to other area school districts, I think.
And they don't have it anymore.
And they don't have it. And I'm not sure why they lost it, or.
So it's a great conversation to have right now for a variety of reasons, not just the food element of it, but also the teacher element and the education and expansion element of it, because this is a conversation that's going to impact budget conversations in the fall. So of course we have the capacity anything. So as long as we have a plan to do it and have funding
That's super important.
we have to have conversations about that. what is the right direction.
And if we were to, if we were to look at the data, and we didn't do that in preparation for this because we didn't know that way the conversation was going to go. If we look at the students who not only are invited but also attend, they are largely students who may receive free or reduced lunches. They may receive other aid or assistance from area organizations like our Got Lunch bags, and they've got weekend bags, like those kinds of things. I know from the students that are here at RMS, from my knowledge of things, that many of our students, they would check multiple boxes on data,
so I think
categories.
that is data we could easily find.
that.
So if we wanted to pursue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could we go to the, oh, perfect. So again, some other things that complement the classroom program. So twice a week, we have the bookmobile, which is like a library on wheels. They're visiting both schools Mondays and Thursdays. All learners can check out books from the mobile library. And then also some classroom visits from, in the past, we've always worked with Bloomfield because May is here in the office. We've leveraged her and made her go and get more love from more kids. So she was actually over at JGS this morning, checking in with people and getting some hugs and love, but kind of keeping that program. But again, being able to do it a little bit more self-sufficient this year because we have May here at the school each day. So that's worked out great.
Yeah. So we are currently in the process of assessing our current programming and discussing some goals for future programming. And so through that conversation, there currently are 4 key things that we're looking at as we keep an eye on the future. Is we really want to continue this inquiry-based programming that's currently doing and enhance that even more. Have that student hands-on inquiry-based, minds-on, hands-on programming that's happening. Learner-centered, that's targeted for individualized needs. So that can be through intervention services, it can be in the core time that's happening in the classroom, but really making sure that we have a depth of knowledge of each student's needs and how we're using that information for guiding the programming over the course of the 3.5 hours that they're with us. We want to continue to collaborate and cooperate with area organizations in various ways. We do this currently through the bookmobile, and the bookmobile goes out, but we're looking for other ways to bring in community partners and also go to community partnerships and see that build between our schools and the communities in which they live and grow, and remind all of the students and our communities that we are in partnership together for what's great for our students and our learners. And increase participation, again, as Nikki had said, that's based on our ability to hire and sustain our staffing, but we would like to see even more learners participate in summer programming. It's an incredible time for student growth and consistency, especially as we move continually towards this inquiry-based, thematic-based programming for students, and helping our learners access it and be present in our schools is really important to them. So those are 4 key things that we're looking to really work towards for future programming. And the assessment analysis of what we're currently doing is not done yet. We're going to see this year, talk with the staff that have participated this year, the families that are participating this year, the learners who are participating this year, and the 4 of us will look at all of that information as we set further goals. And we'll clearly keep the school board updated as we look at that future programming.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Questions or comments?
We were trying to keep it short and sweet.
That's good. No questions. I think I asked my only question. Somebody else has a question, but looks like I'm in the hot seat and I got nothing.
Thank you.
Looks good. It's really good. Good turnout.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What you invited to what is coming is really good.
Yeah. It's wonderful to have students in the building.
I think it was included on one of the slides, but we didn't speak to it though. But we do provide transportation for
Yes, we
learners
didn't
that
put that on.
which I think really
That changes
it allows more
Yeah.
people to be
Yeah.
able to say, hey, I don't have the capacity to get my child to here and there. And here in Ringe, there's a pickup and a drop off at Ringe Rec.
Perfect.
So if they're involved in programming, like they can get on the bus at the Ringe Rec, come
Yeah.
here for half a day and then go back.
Yeah, that's really
And
good.
so that works well
Very
too.
nice.
We're good.
Question regarding those numbers, inclusive of both schools?
Yes.
Okay.
And knowing what
So
the RMS
ratios-
numbers are in that, I think is really
It's
pretty
almost equitable.
like it's pretty similar. Like if you split the numbers in half of them are at RMS and half of them are at JJS.
So am I correct in assuming that given the number of teachers in the program and the number of kids who are attending at the at both locations, that the ratio adult to child, sorry, teacher to child, I guess it's teacher to child is 1 to 8 and 10, and then adult to child might be like 1 to 2.
You have the preschool here, and we don't.
Yes,
right now, so that might alter that
yeah.
a little bit.
We have some learners here at RMS that have qualified through ESY and require a significant amount of adult support. And so our ratio based on that is probably a little bit lower in terms, or higher, whichever way you want to look at it, because we have more associate staff here. But generally, PEP, yeah, I would say we're like a 1 to 8, 1 to 10 teacher to student ratio, which is great for that personal connection piece of getting to know them.
As you follow up with that, can I ask you a question? Okay, all right.
Yeah. Ask away.
The follow-up question would be, so wanting to expand it in the future for more individuals, would you seeking to keep that ratio? Would you be able to expand the ratio? Would you want to reduce the ratio? What are your thoughts around that? And, I know that community partnerships are part of that, so that can be factored into it. I don't know if you have thought.
I think it might be dependent on what we're providing for programming. And so if we're looking at expanding programming within the community, we want to take kids out, or we want to do more hands-on, we might require the ratio to stay the same, similar. You know, I think it would, that conversation would all come with what is the goal.
And I think that too speaks to like the kind of programming that we would offer. So if we were thinking more along the lines of learner-centered programming, and so we may say to families like, your learner has been invited to PEP, and these are the 5 strands of programming that we're offering. Like we're going to have an engineering blah 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 strand that might be, or we have an arts strand, or we have
theater,
an offering. So it's more around like, this is my, as a learner, these are my interests. And so it wouldn't necessarily be, this is the 3rd grade group,
right?
but this is this group of kids that are all have an interest in X, and we're going to run off through programming for them through the umbrella of the arts, or so then I think then it depends on some
The objective of that
themes may require more or less staffing.
Yeah, one of the things came up was PEP usually has a theme. So here at RMS, it's summer safari,
which has really got nothing to do with anything.
I don't understand what a summer safari is, so I have questions. But
Well, here you can see the T-shirt.
oh,
Maps.
I get it now.
and
It's about
maps and-
investigating and animals and safari, and it's
So,
in the summer.
But could our themes potentially be more aligned with what you're saying?
Yeah.
With a content-based theme as opposed to a birds.
We are
Right?
birds.
Is that all we are? Is it
That
just
is
we're birds?
The nice thing though, to speak to that piece about the ratio though, Ruben, is that because it's such a short amount of time, higher ratios, more learners to fewer staff, we start to lose that ability to be able to get to know them more quickly.
Yeah.
And then also, because it's such a short period of time, and then also like leverage that knowledge, that connection, right? So if you have 18 and 1,
That would be hard.
it's going to be a harder lift for those that connection, that
Yep.
social emotional piece
And
than
kids
it
just
would
get
be
lost.
with 8 or 10.
Gosh.
What?
Don't ask me,
Haven't
just ask
seen the
questions.
presentation before. So, all right, so one more question I think we have is around technology usage during this timeframe. What's the philosophy, belief, or the actual way we're doing business?
I can speak to what JGS is currently doing, but again, I've only accessed 4 days of the programming. I'm relatively new, and we have seen there is some utilization of the Chromebooks during the program when it is appropriate. We try to have students engage both off technology and on technology in various ways, focusing always on collaboration and content. And so I think that we're trying to keep a nice balance between the two. We have not accessed technology at JGS or the Chromebooks as much as we might during the school year, but it's definitely present. It's definitely something that we are using as students are, as long as it's interactive. They're like creating sentence structures and things like that with it is what we've seen happen. So it's definitely present, but I wouldn't say that it's all the time in every room. That's not what we're doing currently at JGS.
And I would say here it's barely present. Like I'm actually thinking about it and I was like, I don't think I've seen a student on a Chromebook here this week at all.
I've seen it in one
I haven't seen
here.
it in the 2 days I've been here.
Yeah, JGS, there's been one classroom, two classrooms, one that was doing sentence structure and one that was doing a mathematical component with it.
And so
Okay, so
my
that's
definition
one.
of technology
Yes.
is perhaps a little bit different from what the students, this is summer. We have kids coming here for summer, so we're on top of where you want to go that way, so the, and so, whether it be Chromebooks, technology, doing some sort of, work that way, or worksheet, or workbook driven type thing, I equate them a little bit. There's a little bit of difference, obviously, with the screen time, but, from a learning standpoint, they're about the same type of thinking. How are we addressing those? The reduction of just, for instance, lots of worksheets.
Yeah,
So I think if you go back, could you go back
say
a couple
we-
slides? Juno?
I don't think that when we see the Chromebooks being utilized at JGS that they're being utilized in that way.
So if you, can we make it a little bigger, put it in like slideshow view?
The day is broken up.
So like we've just taken some photographs from this week.
None of them are on.
And so this is what kids are doing. Like they're playing, they're investigating, they're building, and then even on the next slide, like you can see, like there's a couple of kids and they're playing games. Like they're holding up, like I'm trying to guess you, you're trying to guess me. Where the top picture there's a read aloud. So learning is not looking like,
Eyes on
I see that
computer.
you're struggling with learning your addition facts. Here's a worksheet and you will do some addition problems. That's generally not what.
And then, and is it the same at both schools? And then, so for part of the time too, the last portion of the day is project block time, and then they're regrouped differently for that
They're
time, and that is
cross grades
cross
and-
grade level.
Yeah.
So for the morning, well, it's all really in the morning, but for the first bit of time, it's more in their home base skills, things of that nature, and then they break out into different groups for project block time, which is all hands on.
So already been moving forward away from that efficiency. and-
Yes.
and model
Yes.
That was originally developed years ago.
Yeah, I would
Well
say.
on your way to where you want to be going.
The program looks very different now than I actually was involved in teaching PEP than it did years ago. I would say very much so.
And I think that that's been true for the last couple of years. This
Yes.
is
This model.
this is what my 4th year of being here and seeing
Yeah.
PEP. This is in keeping with what
It
I've
used to be
seen
very
each
different.
year.
Yep.
Yeah. No more questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good.
And as we transition, like, I have an interview at 2:15. Is it more appropriate for me to scooch out now rather than halfway through your presentation, or?
Oh, I don't care.
Then I'm
Either way.
gonna stay and then I'll scooch out right at the end and then I get to see you.
Does the audience okay? Does that feel all right?
Which is the, do you know which is the best way for me to go without like getting on the camera?
I mean, right now the camera's focused on this part of the room.
So I'm gonna move
So if you
now.
come over here and then you like roll underneath.
I would have worn my like combat pants and like do like a stop drop and like roll. Yeah, I don't think I have those kinds of skills. So I'm just gonna sit over together.
Before they start, and before RIP, is there any more programming or other things going on in the term between now and next moment?
Okay, so we have our end of year kind of data capture to share with the board as well as the audience. So we're going to start with some discipline kind of stuff and just capturing how things looked for the year as we've continued to invest some time and attention into that side of our school. And then we'll do a little bit of SAT digging, some SAS data, and then look at some next steps for this upcoming school year that we've already started to formulate based on the data. So looking at kind of where we focused this year, as a reminder from last year's conversation, we really spent a lot of time at the beginning of the year and consistently kind of checking in on the professional learning communities and making sure that those rolled out in such a way that our teams could do more of this data diving and applying data to their practice on their own. We spent a lot of time continuing to work on discipline, especially after the spike that we saw in the 2 years following COVID. And one of our goals was to kind of decrease the rate of out-of-school suspension and overall incidents that required administrative attention. And then the last thing was for this year was really looking at writing in particular, but ELA in general, and investing a lot of attention into some of those literacy skills. This year for action steps, all of our team leaders used a consistent bank of resources for PLCs, which will be refined further this year. All of our teams came up with a very clear goal based on data they analyzed, and I just put some examples up here. High school science really recognized a weakness with applying their analysis of graphs into written kind of reports and things like that. So they spent a good chunk of the year creating instructional tools and assessments that they used across all of their science classes, specifically for graphs and graphing and data analysis skills. The middle school teams pretty consistently found a pattern of weakness with evidence-based writing in particular, and being able to formulate a thesis or a point of view and then pull evidence to work on that. So each grade level had a specific focus, but all of them shared that kind of common goal in their PLC work. High school social studies had recognized that document-based evidence was a kind of area where they wanted to focus. They did a pre-assessment and then at the end of the year created some rubrics and did a common writing across all of their social studies classes and did some scoring to identify instructional tools for this upcoming year. And our wellness team had a really interesting goal because that includes family, consumer science, health, and PE. There's kind of a diverse focus on wellness, but they really wanted to get a better sense of how learners recognized healthy routines and believed that all of their disciplines could help to instruct to that area. So their goal was focused around that. We also, for this year, identified a consistent writing and literacy sort of PD pathway for our teacher teams. We are going to be continuing to send teachers to the Empowering Writers series, which has some really great PD centered around pulling in evidence and helping to structure writing, and then Keys to Literacy, which has really good intervention tools. So we've already sent a lot of teacher teams to those this year in the middle level. We're going to expand that into the high school and other content areas this year. Our middle level has also really focused on longer writing, helping to build concrete structures for that writing and build focus. And you'll see some of the data that kind of supports the efforts of that for this past school year. And then on the learner support side, through the school counseling team, we've done a lot of work to increase learner support processes, working with Rachel to kind of reduce recurrent behaviors with kids. So discipline data first. This is just a very short graph showing total incidents that required administrative attention. In the 21-22 school year, we had 1,316 incidents. This year, that was 1,089. So an appreciable drop in referrals, but still a number that obviously can use some work.
This is a whole year?
Whole year.
Okay.
Yep. Whole year, all incident types. The only ones we stripped out of the numbers for both years was truancy and like tardiness to school.
Yeah.
This is really hard to see, and I couldn't get the numbers to go larger, but this is just the kind of major categories of concern. And in each instance, the gray graph is the 21-22 school year. The orange graph is this year. So just like we had been seeing all year, that first area is disrespect, behaviors that are reported under that umbrella of disrespect. We definitely saw a spike of that, and we've been talking about that all year. That's been pretty consistent across basically all secondary schools. I can't even tell you the number of articles I've read about sort of this vexing problem of kids just disrespecting adults and each other. So we noticed that the increase was about 35 instances more this year than the prior year. So it's not like we had this out of control boom of disrespectful behavior, but it's the one category that had a notable uptick that was substantial like that. Disruptive behaviors dropped from 201 instances the prior year to 168 this year. So again, that's a decent drop of those sorts of behaviors recurring. Defiant behavior, where a teacher or a staff member makes a request and a learner refuses, that was cut down from 266 instances in the 21-22 school year to 145 this school year. So that's a substantial drop. A lot of the work we did with learners was about how to recognize and have strategies to not end up in that sort of defiant mode, and how our teachers also develop some skill set to make sure that we avoid that kind of power struggle with learners. Profanity, kind of hand in hand with the disrespect, a slight uptick in administrative addressing of that. Physical aggression, pretty much on par with the previous year. That category is pretty broad. That would include any physical fights. We had one this year that was actually kids putting hands on each other purposefully to harm. I think we had 3 or 4 the prior year, so that one went down a bit. But the overall physical aggression, which is posturing behavior, peer conflict types of stuff, pretty much on par with the previous year. Unsafe behaviors, again, pretty much on par. That would include making sort of inappropriate comments that make people unsafe, not following directions, things like that. So pretty much on par. Vandalism, a little slight decrease. Drugs, a slight increase. Harassment, a pretty notable drop. We had 39 instances of substantiated harassment the previous year. That was cut into a third this year with only 13 substantiated instances. Theft, 8 times each year that we had dealt with. Substantiated bullying. So obviously this does not include reports of bullying, but this is investigated and substantiated. We had 6 instances the prior year, 5 this year, and then weapons, we had 9 instances of that the prior year, 3 this year. So overall, the major categories pretty much declined or stayed relatively the same, with that one carve out of some of that disrespectful kind of behavior, which is a community-wide thing we need to continue to focus on. One of our goals was to make better use of in-school time and reduce the amount of out-of-school time. The top graph shows in-school suspensions, which is this does not capture the length of time. These numbers, one instance of in-school suspension could be a whole day. It could be 2 class periods. We just logged them all as in-school suspension because they've been removed from learning. So that was used in 279 instances to help address behavior this year versus 228 the prior year, whereas out-of-school suspension dropped from 161 instances of that to 122 for this school year. So the graphs are moving the way we'd want them to go. In-school suspension has a bad name, and we're going to be looking at adjusting how we refer to that, but that's a much more appropriate tool for higher level behaviors versus suspending out of school. Now we jump into some SAT stuff. The SATs are the 11th grade assessment for the state. The gray graph is Conant every time. The orange graph is New Hampshire, and the brown graph is the whole US kind of subset of SATs. So this year, our overall mean score jumped by just under, it was about 23 points of a jump. And you can see New Hampshire declined by about 12 points, and the US declined by about 4 points. So we've crossed above the total average this year and are continuing to increase, whereas the other numbers have been dropping quite a bit. I didn't go further back because I consider the COVID numbers to be difficult to wrap my head around, but our curve continues. It's a much longer process, and the state one kind of does this and then declines. So I chose just to kind of focus from more normal years onwards. Evidence-based reading and writing, where we've been kind of focusing some time in both grade spans. We had a 6-point jump this year. New Hampshire dropped about an equal amount, and the US was stable with that. And then math in the high school was where we had our largest leap, an 18-point jump for the high school this year with that result, whereas the state dropped about 5 points and the US dropped about 3 points. So again, we're continuing to move in the right direction, which is great. I'll have more to say about math in a little bit at the high school level, but our learners are doing a lot better with math generally, and this data just kind of bears that out at the high school level. In the middle school, the state assessment is called SAS. This is the ELA results. This is not cohort groupings. I will show those in just a moment. This is just literally 6th grade last year, 6th grade this year. So you can see with ELA, pretty stable. These numbers represent the percentage of learners who scored at a level 3 or above, so which would be the proficient rating. This year in 6th grade, it was 55% scored that level. It was 56% last year, so very stable. 7th grade last year was at 34% level 3 or above. That jumped to 47% this year. And 8th grade was at 29% level 3 or above last year, 35% this year. Math is different story with that. The 6th grade is pretty stable, basically about 30% both years. 7th grade, same thing, hovering in that 30% range. We had a bit of a drop off in this year's 8th grade, dropping from 23% to 17%. One thing to say about the math scores with 8th grade, which I'll talk about, I'll save that for later. There's a caveat with the math scores which for 8th grade, which I'll talk about in a bit. And then of course there's the science assessments for 8th grade as well. Last year was 25% level 3 or above, this year 28%. So the areas that we know we have to continue to work on remain the areas to work on this year as well, math and science, for sure in the middle level. And then these are just the longitudinal breakdowns. So this is math for 6th grade. That box on the right is level 3 or above. So you can see in 4th grade that this particular cohort was 32% level 3 or above in math, remained that way coming at the end of 5th grade, and this year was at 29%. So a very slight shift there. Unfortunately, a larger group ending up in that level 1 category after this 6th grade year. The 7th grade cohort, you can just kind of look through. Again, pretty stable in the elementary years, and then an uptick from where they were in 6th grade. And then the 8th grade cohort, when they were in 6th grade, 11% were proficient or above. Of course, that was the post-COVID year. That increased to 26% and then has dropped back to 14%. So this group needs a lot of our attention. However, again, there's a caveat with 8th grade that I'll talk about in just a moment. And then the ELA scores, you can see 4th grade, 44% level 3 or above. That increased to 54% in 5th grade, relatively stable in 7th grade, dropped just a little bit. I'm not going to keep reading them to you, but you can kind of look.
This
Okay.
is
Now this is 7th grade here.
upcoming 7th, like when we say 7th,
Current-
do you mean the kids who are coming 7th grade this
The
year?
previous, the ones who just finished. This is all last year's data. So the ones who are,
Okay.
this is incoming 8th grade now.
Okay.
And then 8th grade. Again, very stable. So this is the caveat with those SAS math scores. This is the PSAT 8, which we administer for kind of, I'll call it formative data in the fall and spring in 8th grade. It's another way of measuring the skill set and more in line with obviously what they'll be assessed on in high school. And I'll just point out that the math results on this assessment were a little bit more favorable, still not great, but it's assessing at a different type of application of math skill. And one thing that we noticed this year with our new 8th grade math teacher was a lot of heavy focus on high levels of math, but not a lot of transfer of that math skill to the actual types of problem solving that are assessed on the SAS or the PSAT. The PSATs hews a little bit closer to more traditional math type of assessing, which is why the results are a little bit higher here. But we already have recognized that based on looking deeper into this and SAS, that this is now not so much a question of high levels of math, it's how we help learners recognize how that math can be used for problem solving, error analysis, and the other types of things that are actually assessed on these types of exams. And on the ELA side, when you look at the ELA results in this 8th grade group, it was below 40% level 3 or above as measured on SAS, but you can see that by the springtime on the PSAT 8, the percentage meeting the benchmark was at 67%, which was a 10-point jump from where it had been in the fall. So again, different data points telling perhaps a different story. It tells me that again, our ELA reading writing focus has definitely borne fruit. It tells me that some of our math approaches this year worked, especially as measured on this assessment. We still have room to grow on both, but it's not so much of gloom and doom as the SAS results for 8th grade would have initially shown us. And then this is just on the next screen, the 9th grade PSAT 8-9 results. Again, we can see about a 9-point increase in the math score. We don't have any state assessing in 9th grade, so this is a very important piece of data for us. A 9% jump in those meeting benchmark in math between the fall and the spring. ELA, interestingly, a slight dip, very slight, but it's there. That could be one learner dropping into the other category. But the good news on this one was, again, the math was jumping, which is what we want to see. And then one other data point for the high school that I wanted to highlight. Algebra 2 is not a required class for junior year. Most learners kind of drop off of the more formal math track and opt for different types of math. This year, in the incoming year, the amount of learners opting for Algebra 2 has more than doubled from 47 to 99, which is incredible. That tells us a couple of things. It tells us that learners have comfort with math after their algebra and geometry experience in the high school. It tells us that they're recognizing the value of continuing to take these high levels of math, that our teachers are doing an incredible job keeping learners in math. Our school counselors have had a lot of one-on-one conversations to really help learners find a really positive path. But this is only going to be good news for us to continue to grow that math proficiency and application of math skill in the high school. So again, the numbers are in progress with math, but we are definitely moving in the right direction. Some key takeaways from our data here. On the discipline side, incidence in most of our subcategories are dropping. However, we do have more room to continue making improvements. One of our goals is to virtually eliminate over a period of time out of school suspension for anything that's not a safety or drug kind of issue. That requires a lot of systemic work, which we're continuing to do, but we do believe in the long run we can get to that kind of place. OSS incidents trended way down. ISS, which allows for more of that in-school processing, trended up to kind of take its place, which is good. Again, we'll continue to work on how that ISS program works. ELA results are improving at the middle level rapidly with our looping model with 7th grade continuing with the same teachers in 8th grade and them sustaining right around that 50% or above proficiency level. They'll be able to do a lot of growth in 8th grade, which will continue that trend of improving literacy coming into high school. Math remains a major focus area, particularly at the middle level. Obviously, nobody should sit with a straight face and say that we're satisfied having 30% or less proficient or above in math, and I'm not going to do that. We have a lot of work to do in that area. It will remain a focus going forward. However, the high school, both ELA and math, are in a consistent increasing line of proficiency as each year's class gets to 11th grade and their skill sets bear out increasing levels of proficiency. That's helping to support kind of other things we want to do with STEM and science down the road. And in both grade spans, science remains a critical focus. We're not doing enough to make sure learners are ready for high levels of science work. So coming into this year, we will continue to focus on professional learning communities, refine the focus of those communities based on this year's trends and data. That's not a one-off kind of thing that we did in one school year and we're done with it. That's an investment over time to make sure those groups in real time can access their own types of data and use this type of data to refine instructional approaches for learners. We will focus on math this year. I've already talked to the superintendent as a former math teacher about helping to kind of plan out some things with math to help our teachers have more tools and definitely to increase the transfer skills and improve outcomes, particularly at the middle level. We'll continue to roll out the professional development that we identified last year for ELA, moving it to high school teachers and other content teachers. One of the things that our vision for literacy has continued to reinforce is that literacy is not confined to English class. It needs to happen everywhere, and our teachers need a set of tools to help confront weakness in that place, in that area where they may not have had that training in the past. Discipline-wise this year, we're going to focus, the administrative team has been running our own summertime PLC to start revising our systems, envisioning what we want to see, and drifting more towards that restorative approach. I'm using the word drifting because you can't lurch a system into that type of method. It takes time and planning. So we're drifting as we can towards that area, but continuing to emphasize learning as we go. And with science this year, Ms. Oshiak, who's new in her position, will be spending some time crosswalking the science learning goals that we have in the schools, middle and high school, with the state assessed items to ensure that we're not missing something. Because when you see a persistent weakness in data, the first question is, are we missing something in instruction? So we'll start there this year with the science teams and also look at how we're assessing in the classroom to make sure the types of assessing and problem solving we're asking learners to do during the school day aligns with what they're going to be assessed on at the end of the school year. So that will be another major focus area this year to address that area of our data. And before we take questions, I did want to ask Mrs. Summy, Mrs. Baker, and Ms. Oshiak to talk a little bit about some of the things that have been done or will be done this coming school year that we've kind of already talked about. And in particular, Rachel, I was hoping to hear from you a little bit more about some of the approaches you and Carrie took on ISS with discipline, and Kim, a little bit about the counseling team, how that's worked with Access this year.
Yeah, this year we tried a lot of approaches with kids working together once there was a conflict with people, talking with them individually, making sure that they understood, what was the conflict and then how we can move forward. So we had a lot of success with kids. Once we talked individually with kids, are you willing to sit down and talk and process things? And every single time the kids were like, oh, I'm so glad we could sit down and talk about it. If they weren't prepared to do that emotionally, that wasn't something we're going to push. But I think, knock on wood, we didn't have any reoccurring situations once we did that. I think also we tried to work with, if there was a big conflict with the teacher, is bringing in the teacher. Again, once we talk with the teacher and the student about, how can we move forward? Not necessarily just like, this is a time to like hammer you one more time, but really to help both the teacher and the learner to, talk about their strengths and what their I guess, bridges were. And again, I think it was successful, especially with the kids, but I think the teacher also gained a lot of confidence and felt better about how to understand maybe what the conflict was. And sometimes it had nothing to do with the actual subject, and a lot of times it was stuff that was going on outside or a peer conflict. And I think we also tried to put some real life experiences with kids understanding what they did and how it impacts potentially the future for them. Again, looking at, if I make this mistake, how I don't want to repeat it because the stakes are higher, and what can I do to put in some resources to help when I do get in that situation again. And working with the counselors was awesome because you have different ways of looking at things from different lenses. And I think the kids also saw that it was like wraparound services, and it reinforced that the kids care. We had one learner who said, wow, all you guys keep talking because you care about me. And it was great to actually hear that person say that. And it was sincere. And this was a new learner, and that person hadn't had great experience in public schools up until he arrived with us. So it was one of those amazing moments. So I think we had a lot of growth, and especially we learned a lot about some of our kids that needed that additional support in school, and also attaching some things outside of school. So.
And then we have the Access program. So the Access program is available to all learners and really is there to support learners who maybe have challenges, social emotional challenges, that kind of personal social things that get in the way, and that can be they're feeling overwhelmed, they're feeling anxious, they need some grounding in the morning, some time to reflect, building those positive relationships, kind of breaking down those barriers so that they can feel success and engagement in the classroom. And I think we brought that upstairs. It was a program that was downstairs, kind of off the middle school cafeteria and kind of isolated from us, but also from our teachers in our regular classrooms. So this year that program was across the hall from the school counseling team. And it was just amazing to be able to collaborate and work together and bring learners back and forth. And we saw more learners engaging in the traditional classroom setting for longer periods of time. We saw our core academic teachers coming in and teaching classes to smaller groups in that classroom setting. Just this incredible partnership with all of the staff, And I think really increasing also our middle school program. So like at the beginning of the day, we worked with learners in 7th and 8th grade to help ground them for the day, and they went off. And then we did a small group with 7th and 8th graders at the end of the day to kind of reflect on how things were going. And those learners had great success, and many of them are moving on to full schedules next year without supports built in. They'll do more drop-ins. I think it was just a great partnership, and I think being close together and being able to tag team and partner helped with that success. So we look forward to continuing that work. And some learners used it on a daily basis, and some learners used it when needed. And I think that was the beauty of the program is it was available to anyone who needed it at any time.
And you just want to talk briefly about some of the data dive that you've done already and kind of that piece?
Sure. So there are some trends that we're noticing in math that where kids seem to be having some sticky issues is around algebraic thinking. And that's like across the board. Like if it starts in middle school, it holds constant through high school. And so hoping to do some diving with the math teams around how to increase sort of their algebraic, like mathematical reasoning skills, and maybe what specific standards under the heart of algebra that kids are struggling with. Looking at for reading and writing, where our kids, there was some interesting data around essay writing, right? So when we looked at the essay for the kids, even kids that didn't do well, it didn't seem to matter if they were in honors classes or in CCP classes. And so there's a type of writing that this essay really asks for. So thinking about how do we increase writing like throughout the curriculum and thinking about some common language. David and I have been talking about some common language we'd like to bring into the middle and high school around types of writing that the kids are doing so that as they progress through the grades, we're all speaking the same thing. And looking at some organizational structures to do that. And then what else do you want me to talk about?
That's great. I mean, and more. I mean, in a short week, you've already done a lot of that planning work.
Yeah, Kim and I were talking too, though. It's really interesting. The SAT, right? The SAT, it's going to change in the fall. So we're kind of treating this as like a little bit of a baseline. It's going to get a lot shorter. The exam's going to shift in a little bit about what it's asking kids to do. So it's going to be kind of hard to compare like spring and fall because they might be two very different tests. So can't wait to see what that does.
It's going to adapt to their answers and change. So if they show a weakness in something early on, they'll get different types of questions. It won't keep pounding them with stuff that they got stuck on, basically.
I think it's shorter. Too.
Which isn't there one that's, maybe is it the PSCT? One is pencil, one is computer.
So now they're going to be all digital. So all tests, yes, PSAT 10 has always been paper
Which
pencil.
is interesting.
But now they're moving to all digital, and that is so the test can
it can adapt.
right? So all learners will get module 1 will look the same, and based on module 1, that will determine what module 2 will look like. And it's traditionally, I'll use the SAT as an example, that traditionally is about a 3-hour test. It now will be a 2-hour test. Learners can have calculators on all math sections. So really shifting shorter passages, things that are more connected to what they're learning in the classroom. So they did some pilots last year that were really successful and really good feedback from learners and teachers and administrators. So we're excited we'll experience that for the first time in October. So it's really exciting.
That is good.
Yes.
I see a lot less anxiety about
Yes,
testing.
and that was some of the feedback from the learners is I didn't feel as overwhelmed, as stressed as I did in the past. So that was good feedback.
If they see stuff they know, they'll, I don't know, you'd think that they're going to get more excited, and they're like, I knew that one.
Right.
Instead of like discouraged all along the way.
And then just start clicking through.
That. Yeah.
And they said they'll have more
That's good.
time with each
That's really
question too, so that's also
yeah.
helpful. I think they felt rushed at times to get through the test. So that is exciting. So we'll learn more about
So the
that
data
later
will be
this summer.
different, just when we think that we're getting good data. Woo, there it goes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So these are some things that you're focusing on for the upcoming year. You also mentioned that you have some desires to increase in learning improve learning opportunities, maybe the environment, maybe how things are done. I mean, I'm just kind of throwing out a lot of possibilities regarding science inquiry, things of that nature. We just heard from the elementary school that they're thinking about looking at doing that, and that's within the summer programming. I think that there's evidence that that's happening within the school year as well. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what type of timeline you're thinking and what types of things you're doing to build toward that?
So the sixth grade math and science teacher this past year did a lot of work together. They shared a planning time. They did a lot of kind of interdisciplinary units together throughout the course of the year where they would just trade learners back and forth. To some degree of success, they had some units that were really positive. I think their last one, they said, we have a lot of revising we want to kind of do with this, but they really were trying to build an inquiry model that wove math deeply in with the science. So that's already one foundation that they're going to continue building this upcoming year. The 7th and 8th grade science teachers this year will be doing some work. Anne-Marie doesn't know this yet, but with Anne-Marie and myself, to design some STEM options for 7th and 8th grade that can fully replace the traditional 7th grade and 8th grade science class. Again, the idea being to build out a pathway that's more about inquiry, more about integration of math and science skills, and getting learners to be a little more in that creative mindset as they learn those two disciplines. So that will probably be one more school year. So obviously not this current school year, but we're shooting for the following school year to have those options in place for 7th and 8th grade. We are also considering adding some sort of a different approach in 7th grade. And as we look at challenges with staffing for some of our UA classes, we may look at accelerating like an inquiry program that could be just for 7th graders and could be one of their full year UAs, again, to build out that sense of inquiry and integration of science and math skills. So we've got some things in the works. Most of them are probably a year out, possibility for one or two of them this coming school year.
Well, and the high school teachers recognized early on, they recognized last year in their data diving that where kids were struggling was around graphs, interpreting graphs, reading graphs. And so they've started to do some work in their PLCs around building some assessments and I think some practice items and incorporating more graphing into their courses. So I'm guessing we're going to continue to build on that. Because they did recognize it as an issue as a department, and so probably doing some more work with them to think about how we can also maybe do some of that in math or even in some other, English and history classes where we're teaching kids how to look at graphs in nonfiction material and do some interpreting of that.
And the other piece is that the high school science team was the only team this past year that was not using Otis, which has an impact because that means that their assessments were not always tied as clearly to specific learning goals related to their course. This year, they'll be using Otis. So that will give them, as well as administration, some data on what learning goals are being covered, how quickly they're being covered, how many times. I think that will help the work that the team's going to do with looking at the courses. We have a huge amount of offerings of science courses for a school our size, but that's where the question starts to become which of those learning goals are maybe not aligned to any bigger, broader type of learning, or which ones we're not actually covering all that much and spending time on with learners. That will give us some material to then maybe do some revisions and build some different pathways that way as well. But again, that'll be at least a couple of years before we see some of that work really take off.
You just talked about learning goals, and I know that you've been in the process of, or currently in the process of going through the accreditation process with NEASC for both the middle school and high school, so the entire school, which is really neat. One of those items that needed to be addressed, as you were already working on, which was the learning goals, the curriculum work, and the foundational curriculum. Where do we stand there, and what type of revision process needs to continue to happen as a result of, because you just described a little bit of a revision process for science anyway, so I understand that, but just in general, kind of where are we looking really pretty good? Where are we needing to kind of improve some things and so forth? It would be interesting also to know if where we have a lot more stability, whether that even matches up with some of the data that we have.
It does.
So I would say most of the disciplines have their learning goals completed and their ICANN statements written. There are even some departments that are ready for some vertical teaming, like history is in such good shape that we can start to actually look at learning goals 6 through 12, where we had kept them at like 6 through 8, 9 through 12. And so this is the year that we're ready to actually sit everybody down and look and see what's happening broad brush, and to see if there are gaps or where there are things that are taught in one grade but never taught anywhere else, and start to tighten those up. And then there are a few courses, like science being one of them, but that's expected, some electives in English, and a couple courses in history that need to finish their learning goals. But other than that, I think everybody's in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
So,
I'd say 90% of the work is done at this point, at least. And the only holdouts are courses that are newer courses, are obviously not
like
quite
the
done.
history of fashion.
Yep. And then for all of them, we have to identify which elements of the vision of the graduate are being covered and assessed in that course. That vision of the graduate was just completed in June, so that'll be work that happens this current school year. But we're in very good shape.
So now that the goals are written, now what it's looking at is how they connect across grade bands 6 through 12. And so then we can figure out where there are gaps in knowledge. So I'd say we're moving into phase 2, 1.5.
My next question has a couple different parts to it, and one of them has to do with the conversation around access and how access this year was very different. We know that there was some transition over a couple of years, and this year seemed to be very smooth. And I think location of things matters, intentional location matters as well. But you alluded to the notion that learners were in their classes more often. They were coming out when they needed to. This was open access. It sounds like that means that we had a kind of a more inclusive environment, perhaps, which is good. The data that you have up here, have we looked at the learners who accessed that programming, I guess you could call it programming, that process, that learning environment, how they fared to how they used to fare?
And not just the discipline data, we looked at some of the academic, like the number of credits, the classes that they passed, and saw much more success and less discipline, or more supportive discipline, I would say, different ways to look at that, more opportunity for teams to come together when we were seeing some things come up on a consistent basis, so that we were able to do that like on the fly. And so I think we were able to put some interventions and supports and bring in families quicker, because we were all communicating sometimes multiple times throughout the day. So I haven't sat down and looked at each individual learner, but just some of the learners that I know had struggled in the past. And I also think that they built relationships with a lot of other adults, not just within the Access program. We saw them build relationships with some of our social studies teachers that they had never had the opportunity to do before, just even the location of where they were taking their classes. All of the learners in Access took all of their math classes in the traditional classroom setting without supports. That was new. Before we were doing some smaller group. When they needed support, they might step out for like 15 minutes of the class and get support. So we saw them being willing to take more risks, to be a little more curious about what was happening, to build different types of relationships. And I don't know, Rachel, you could also speak to that, because you worked with a lot of those learners, but it was like amazing. It just kind of naturally happened. And I give a lot of credit to the Access staff too for encouraging that and supporting that.
We have some learners who returned from out of district placement over the last couple of years, who had been placed either in elementary school or early middle school, and returned back and were engaged in this program as part of their plan for being in school. And they've done better than most other learners. I mean, virtually no behavior concerns, or when they had challenges, that because they were anchored there, it was very quickly resolved. Their academics, and one learner passed every single class. And the last time I had seen this individual, they had not done that. So there's a lot of sort of anecdotal evidence with some of these learners. In particular, the learners it was kind of designed to provide that space for seem to be thriving because they had that resource right in the center of the school for them.
Yeah, I think because there were learners seeing the different adults, like Kim was saying, is then you didn't have them dependent on one person if that person wasn't there. And I think they saw that the community but that a lot of people, you know, are there to support them. I think also some of our kids got to meet other kids, and I think some of the older kids were able to maybe kind of say, hey, you know, this is important, you know, or, you know, that's not a good decision, maybe that made with different language, but and I think also it gave the kids the opportunity, if they were really having a tough day, whether they recognize themselves, is that they self-regulate a little bit better. And I think also if a teacher had noticed that things kind of were having a trend, you know, there was more of a plan to check in. And it was, yeah, for some of those kids, it was amazing. And therefore they didn't have the discipline, you know, formal discipline in our statistics. So.
Last question I have for everyone. And the data that I saw up there is a whole group data for the most part. There was some conversation about people accessing this summer programming eventually who may fall more into the reduced lunch category that is stated. That data. And we have some restrictions about what we can know about that information. The gap between the students or the students with IEPs and students without, have we spent time looking at that? And if not, in the future, could we start to look at that significantly to make sure that we are providing what those individuals need in order to be successful with their typical peers? It's fine if you have. I'm just, you know, just wondering.
We have not yet, but that's certainly information that we can mine. It's not a,
Same.
we can find that.
That's good. That's it.
That's it for us, yeah.
Yeah, guys. All right. Still is up? You done?
So before we have the MTSSB quarterly report, I was hoping to engage Charlie and Daisy in this as well, but quarterly is feeling like a bit much for MTSSB updates. I think that you have made the point, Kim, that it feels like Fraser's here every
Poor
other.
guy.
Yeah.
He's like, and again.
Would it be okay if we adjusted this to like a December timeframe and then like end of school year timeframe, so it's twice a year maybe?
I like that. I'll definitely talk to the other two, but
Okay.
absolutely. I feel like you're just like repeating yourself because there's not even enough time
Right.
to put into place what you've talked about. And I'm like, yeah.
Well, and I think too, thank you for broaching that subject. We're getting to the point now where we're getting ready to run some pilots. And so we're not going to have as much information to collect it, to review it quarterly as much as like we need time to sit down with our staff and collect the data and then review the data and then make decisions based off of that.
Yeah.
So for me, it seems like I'm not going to have much to continue to report to you on a quarterly basis. So I do appreciate you guys taking that into consideration.
That's great. That's great. Now I'll be excited to hear about it. Yeah, that's a great idea. But we will listen to you today.
All right. So Nick, if you can go to the next slide. So the last time we met, we walked you through our process of how we got to choosing second step and what that looked like and the feedback that we got with our staff. We had reached out to our teachers who are interested in piloting the second step, which is a curriculum that we're going to use for our tier 1 curriculum. There were some pretty dynamic changes at the JGS school. So we had some shifting in some teachers who are switching grade levels or who are going into a different grade level or different position. But we are fully staffed for our pilot at both schools. So we're excited to get that going. The kits will be purchased this summer, and we're hoping to get them to the teachers as soon as possible so that they can get their hands on and get their feet wet a little bit before school starts. We are going to continue to, we are continuing with our cultural base of responsive classroom. We had 26 participants last year who participated in the 4-day training. This year we had close to 30 new teachers in the district or staff members at both elementary schools participating this summer, and they just finished that up. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. So we're continuing to build our cohort for that. We are also going to be collaborating with the representatives. She'll come in and do some day visits to observe our staff and see how we're doing with the fidelity of that program. So we have some pretty good plans moving forward with that piece. Nick, if you get the next one. So with our second step pilot, we are going to be very intentional with how we roll this out. Our biggest piece is that data will be collected and analyzed for program effectiveness and learner outcomes. We're going to be meeting regularly at the trimesters to take a look at that information. So we'll be having like the pilot, the second step PLC. And then we'll be discussion around moving forward with the school-wide community and how we can incorporate that piece as well. And then at the end of the school year, is this something that we feel like is really a good solid fit for our schools? And do we want to make that more school-wide versus just that small little piloted program? We did a lot of work with our support center over at JGS. And I'm going to talk about the first bullet in a little bit, but we did a complete redesign of the support center for this coming school year. But basically what we ended up doing for the 2022-2023 school year is we did a complete overhaul of equipment and materials that were there that just needed to be taken out, that were no longer necessary, no longer appropriate, outdated. So a lot of cleaning. We did a lot of collaboration with administration and facilities to make changes to the environment to make sure that there was maximum safety for our staff and our learners. Taking things out that we really didn't need to be there, making sure that it was set up in a manner that functioned well and kids can move through that environment. We increased communication with parents, family, and community members as team members to assist with regulating learners. So our goal to, much like the middle school, high school, was to reduce any out-of-school suspensions or in-school suspensions, not making the phone calls to the parents to say, I'm sending your kid home, but we've tried A, B, C, and D. Your child really wants to talk to you. He's dysregulated. Can you join us with that? And we have found much more success when parents are involved with that piece. We have some parents who just talk to them over the phone. We have parents who said, great, I'll be there in person, and then help regulate and get their kid back to class, and then have left the building with their child remaining in school. So it's been more successful. So we're going to continue to increase that. And again, the parents as a team member, not just the school versus the parents. We implemented a data collection system for our support center. So we collected data on, who was coming in, how often they were coming in, what they were coming in for, whether the behavior, what types of behaviors were referred to that program for. And then we took that and we can break that off into different months versus different types of behaviors. So it allowed us to really be able to take a look at a bigger picture, and then we have more information based on student needs, so we can then start to identify who are our tier 1 kids, tier 2 and tier 3 kiddos for programming. We did a lot of collaboration with teachers and staff for that data collection, so really training them on how to collect that data and what information we were looking for, and then how often it needed to be collected and reviewed. With our kindergartners, we provided some alternative recess. We had a small handful of learners who really struggled with playground expectations and safety. So we provided alternative recesses. So our goal was not to take recess away, but we provided 5-10 minute quick mini lessons, and then provided them an alternative, like an indoor recess kind of opportunity for them, so that they continue to build on that skill that we just taught. And then we took that from the indoor recess and went out to recess, supporting them until they no longer needed support, and we found success in that as well. And then with some of our learners, just implementing a check-in, check-out system with learners was really effective. And sometimes starting your day off throwing a ball and playing catch or playing kickball or soccer to start your day off was more effective than having them extremely dysregulated around the classroom or throughout the school. So when we take a look at our tier 2 and 3 programs, for this coming school year, we have an addition of a comprehensive classroom-based behavior program. And we have got final state approval from that through the Department of Education. It is a special education placement, so any child placed in that program will have to go through a placement meeting with the IEP team. We have a full-time special education teacher and a paraeducator that is assigned to that classroom. And then we'll be looking at the integration of the school counselor, going in and doing some SEL lessons with them as well. For our support center, this is that first bullet from the previous slide. We have completely redesigned and will be rebranding our support center. For our tier 2 behavior, we have moved the physical location just to kind of get that negative stigma out of there. Like, it's brand new location, fresh and clean. We have a full-time teacher and paraeducator that will be attached to that program. And then within that space, the school counselor will have an office, so she will then be able to connect and provide some support and some lessons directly with students as well in a much larger setting rather than stuffed in her tiny little office.
So is this mirrored between RMS and JGS, like, or just at one?
Just at JGS.
Just a JGS.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember the slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're excited about moving forward with that piece, and the school counselor is really excited about having a much larger space and being able to get into our tier 2 and 3 programs. So the current work, again, we're continuing to increase partnerships with community agencies. We're being more collaborative team approach between school and parents and families. And this summer we have a group of educators who are working on the web development that will house all of our resources for the school district-wide and be able to share that out. And we will have a spot in our school newsletters that will, the MTSS pieces will live in, so that parents will be able to see that and access that. And Kim Baker is heading up a lot of that on the middle school, high school level as well. So lots of work. So as we continue to weave the MTSSB pieces throughout the district, we are seeing some pretty amazing results with our truancy cases. So with a 10-day threshold, we have seen a 50% decrease from last school year to this school year. For the 15-day threshold, we've seen a 37% decrease. The 20 days or higher, a 64% decrease, and an overall district-wide a 25% decrease in truancy this school year.
You can jump right in from there. So at the middle high school, I think when I presented in April, we kind of highlighted some areas for focus, our goals for the 23-24 school year. Really continuing to build community partners, collaboration, just making sure that we know our resources, we're using our resources, they know us, and we can support each other. Really focusing on that mentoring program. What does that look like for our learners? Bringing in more of the signs of suicide programming. We started with some of that earlier last year, and I'll talk about each of these areas in a few minutes, but this is just the highlight. We talked about building more tier 1 programming for high school, but also I think for middle school, and looking at what we were doing. I think we're looking at all grades 6 through 12, bringing in a school store, and then increasing the collaboration and communication with our families. So for community partners, some of our goals, we already have been in collaboration with Reality Check, and they came and talked with our middle school learners about forming an after-school program, an after-school group. I mean, we really want some of the messaging and the work that we do to have student voice and choice, and how do we bring some of that positive messaging in when we're talking about substance use in particular, and as they're making decisions and choices as they head into high school, what that looks like and the resources that are available. And it's much more powerful when it comes from other students, right, other learners. not just adults, always kind of talking and sharing. There's also an opportunity for this group to work with the community. Reality Check had reached out and asked us to do some programming at some of the other local places in our community, and having students be involved in that, I think, would be great. So Sarah will be coming over and working with a group of students in the fall. The River Center, we repartnered with the River Center last year, and we ran what we called an Adulting 101 ELO group, and it was super successful. We had 10 learners participate, the best attendance ever. They showed up to every single group. They were engaged. It really is focusing on those skills that all learners need when they graduate. And so we will be meeting this summer to kind of reflect with the person who facilitated that group and talk about bringing additional groups, maybe one in the fall for seniors and then one in the spring for juniors. And learners got to earn credits for that, so it was super successful. And then just other ways that we can partner with River Center. We partnered with Dartmouth Health last year to bring the Save a Life program in. They have reached out and want to partner with us in other ways, so we'll be working with Lexi to bring in some other programming and talk about ways that we can partner. We talked last year about bringing in the therapy dogs. We never got that over the goal line. That is something that we definitely want to do. I know it's very popular at the elementary schools, and somebody had a puppy visit the middle high school today, and all the learners that were with us for summer programming were very excited. And so we know that that's something that our learners need and would benefit from having. And then we talked a lot about last year about how do we get people to know about what's happening in our schools and the needs of our schools, and how do we have the opportunity to learn more about the resources that are available and how we can partner. And so we talked about hosting kind of a meet and greet, inviting our elementary partners to come in and be part of that, and just sending out invitations to anyone and everyone we think might be a great partner, and having that conversation and getting to know each other a little bit. So that will be a focus for us in the fall. The New Hampshire Department of Education has partnered with One Trusted Adult to bring for free to all schools at the middle and high school level programs that are really geared towards your advisory or mentoring period. And it really focuses on helping learners at the high school level kind of look at their strengths, investigate and evaluate their relationships and their connections, and really identifying who those positive adults are in our building, or maybe or in our community. And so, and the same is true at the middle school level. The programs are a little bit different at the middle school level at grades 6, 7, and 8. It's about journaling, and they have a workbook that they work through. And at the high school, I think there's 25 different activities that learners can engage in. So the implementation training that the school counseling team will do will happen once school starts, and then we'll work to train our mentor teachers and then slowly bring this in. But last year we talked a lot about different trainings about helping our learners identify who those trusted adults are, or at least having one in the building, someone they can, connect with. We see more success in school when they have adults in the building, or a adult in the building that they feel connected to. So this is a big focus of that. We're really excited to learn more about the program. Right before the end of the school year, all the materials came, all the journals came, so we already have those. And so just waiting to do the training to learn more about it. So I think it's a great resource. And it's great that the Department of Education has partnered, because it's at no cost to us, which is great. Last summer, members of the school counseling team did the training for the Signs of Suicide program for learners in middle and high school. It's a train the trainer program. So then from there, we trained our staff at the middle high school level. And then the next goal is to bring some of this into the classroom. Certainly what it looks like at a middle school level looks very different from what it looks like at a high school level. So we'll be working to continue the trainings with our staff, to continue the conversations, and then to do some work with our learners. Most likely we'll start with some 8th grade work in the 8th grade health classes and work with the health teachers, and then also with our high school level health class, which is Healthy Life Choices, and working and training those teachers too to bring some of that into the classroom. And it aligns with what their learning goals, but it's also an opportunity for the school counseling team to partner with our classroom teachers and be in there and working with our learners. And really, the whole part is the act, care, tell. So when you're worried about somebody, how you might respond, acting on that, letting somebody know you care about them, but also making sure that our learners don't hold that to themselves. That's a lot to carry. And so making sure they know it's okay to tell a trusted adult, either in the building or at home, and helping them identify who those individuals are. So it's things that we talk to learners about all the time, but it gives them some resources and some language that they can use when they're for themselves, but also for others that they know. So for Tier 1 programming, last year we started to adopt some monthly themes, and then and I'll use an example, like we did healthy relationships, we did kindness month, we did the suicide prevention month, and each time we have a monthly theme, we invite community partners in to do some of the programming. Usually that programming is done in the cafeteria during lunch, and I know that seems a little silly, but it's an opportunity for us to have all learners. They engage, we engage, the adults in the cafeteria engage with the learners, and it's been pretty successful. There's usually also a component that happens during mentoring, so we provide the resources for the mentoring teacher, and then sometimes there's classroom pieces to that, but also what I should have put up there is usually there's some type of parent outreach too, like an email, this is what's happening, here's some resources that you can use or are available to you. So we'll continue to do that. And last year, I think we probably did it for maybe 3/4 of the months in the school year. And we're already working on adopting those themes ahead of time so that we can let families know, we can secure our community partners and all the resources that we need to have those be successful. Second step, last year, all 7th graders were able to participate in second step. We had a class called Skills for Success that ran, and that's where a school counselor implemented the program. This year, we are actually going to do it in the transition class for grades 6 and 7. So our 7th graders will also have that in their schedule next year. And so the school counselor actually will be in those classes, at least one of those classes each week. So all learners will have the opportunity in grade 6 and 7 to participate in second step. We will be doing some programming in 8th grade. We just haven't decided exactly what that will look like for our 8th graders. It may be pieces of the second step program. It may not be the whole program because we don't have a designated block for that. So kind of figuring out what that looks like. We'll still continue to use it in small groups too. I think I shared at our last meeting that those lessons are set for about 40 minutes or so at the middle high school level, but we pulled pieces of them at times to work in small groups with learners or one-on-one with learners. There's a lot of great reflection questions and pullouts that you can take from the program. So we'll probably do some of that with 8th grade. And then I'm excited to then kind of loop back to how it's going at the elementary schools and to give our feedback. I love the fact that it could be a K-8 program that we do, and the learners are kind of goes from one year to the next. So that's really exciting. I already talked about one trusted adult, and there'll be more. I'm sure there'll be a lot more. We have some really great new members of the counseling team that will start in August with us, and I'm really excited about kind of their experiences that they'll bring to us. So I can imagine that this list will grow with their input and their guidance, and so that's super exciting for us. So I know that was really, a school story. I don't want to forget about, I thought that was like maybe my last slide, but sorry, I'll go quick. So we've been trying to figure out, I think, for the last few years, how to help students have some of their basic needs be met. So we've partnered with Got Lunch, tried different avenues for access to snacks and food during the school day or things they can take away, how we can help kids get clothing or hygiene products or other school supplies that they may need. And so thanks to some shifting that's happening in our building, we actually will have a location where all of these things will be available to our learners. And we really want to have it be like a school store. Everything is free there. You don't have to pay for anything, but so it's open to all learners. So there's no stigma that you have to come to this closet area or this space, between 12-in-1 to get something that you may need, that any learner could walk in at any time and, you know, pick up something that they might want or need, or they might come together with other friends. So that's still a work in progress, but we're closer to getting that all set up and ready to go. It's something we've been working on, and we have like a lot of the materials. We're looking for the location. I think we've finally been able to secure that little location.
Will it be access for both?
Yes.
Will it be housed in which building?
So it'll be housed, I think, across from the art rooms. There's it's a closet. It's like a bigger area there, and putting it there so that like everybody goes through that. That's by the library. So it is in the nurse, right? And so it's a great location. If you do want to do it, kind of not wanting anybody to see you, probably can do that too, but you can just pop in there.
Is it a situation too where could teachers go in and have something sort of in their room, like if a kid's just in their room or pops in their one trusted adult, you know, and they're like, I don't want to go over there, but I need this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think once it's set up, then we'll reach out and let our families know. So if other people want to make donations, you're cleaning out a closet or getting rid of things, there's a place that you can drop off those materials and we can take those. You know, I know we've done a lot of communicating through emails, and I know that can be overwhelming. So we're looking for other ways to communicate with our families. So we talked about, I think a few years ago, there was a monthly counseling center newsletter. So bringing that back on board, updating information on a regular basis. We're able to meet with Juno to talk about that. I'm really excited about the opportunity to kind of get our stuff updated in there on a regular basis. We did a lot of communicating every other week with our juniors and seniors, because for those grade levels, there's always a lot of community events and career research, exploration opportunities, college visits, those types of things. So I think we'll stick with that. Maybe try to figure out how to streamline it, because it can be overwhelming for people, but it's time sensitive and we want our families to have that. And then we do a lot of evening events. We partner with NEEF to come in and do a lot around the college planning piece, but they're also adding a career piece. And I should have mentioned when we were talking about the SATs. So when learners take the SATs, it won't just be college major information that they'll be getting. They'll be getting information about career training programs, career opportunities and options that they might consider. So that it's not going to just be this college focus, it's going to be the college and career focus. And so we also want to bring in more resources and opportunities for learners who maybe are not interested in continuing their education after high school. How can we make sure that all of our learners have a solid plan when they graduate from high school, whether they're entering the workforce? Do they have the resources that they need to do that? Do they have a cover letter, a resume, references they can take with them? Where do they go to apply for jobs? All of that, and working with our community resources to bring in some of that for our learners and for our families. So I think that will be a definite focus for us, in addition to keeping all those college planning evenings and resources that we have available. That's it for me.
Excellent. So a lot of stuff is going to be implemented on both ends this year. You have I heard you say you have like some resources and books and whatnot ready to rock and roll. So we got a lot that has been in the works and now it's go time.
Yes.
Excellent. I like that. You got this. Go time. I like go time. That's good. Any questions?
David, this one's for you.
We have been supported through MTSSB in a couple different ways. One is with the Department of Education. I'm assuming we're still getting some support from them.
I think we're at 1 more year left.
1 more year left with them. Thank you. The other was a grant that helped pay for some of the groups to meet and also maybe some materials and so forth. Can you give us the status of what is happening with that grant, and is it still helping us support with any of the materials that you mentioned will be coming on in with the second step?
Yeah, so we have one more year left with that grant as well. I have connected with Dennis Calcutt, and we have sent in a request for a tier 2 curriculum, My Little Spots of Emotions, and some other materials for our Behavior Center over here at RMS, My Big Life Journal books. There has been some miscommunication with some members at the grant, so we're still trying to weed through that and get that settled as soon as possible. They have hired all of our MTSSB teachers and team members as teacher consultants, so they get paid 1.5 times their hourly rate to work on things MTSSB related that are beyond contractual hours here. I have requested more information from our business department, so I can send that forward to get them connected for this final year and contracted, so that they'll get paid for those hours as well. After this fiscal year, we will then be responsible for either stipend positions for them, so we need to consider that during the budget season. So they are a reimbursement grant, which makes it a little bit more difficult because when we don't have the money to put up front to begin with, it makes it hard to use their funds. But the agreement that I had with Dennis Calcutt was he was going to pay for the curriculum for both RMS and for JGS for the My Little Spots of Emotions for tier 2. They would technically own it and then give it to the district. So those are the finite pieces that we're still weeding through. That's where we are.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is that all the stuff?
That's all the stuff.
All right, I like it. And our next meeting,
Should be Thursday, Thursday, August 10th. Do we want to do early like this again at 1 o'clock?
is,
I don't know. Nikki and I are both out that week. So and I believe Ashley is
I
as
might take that week off as well.
well. So just in regards to elementary representation at that meeting.
Oh,
I'm
that's,
out that
You
day
were
too.
all out. We're all
Actually,
out.
we're-
Travel day.
and that's the Keene State thing that this group's going to for 2 days.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
right.
so not the 10th.
So not the 10th.
Third I'm gone.
Do we want to look at the 17th?
Yeah. Yeah, we can shoot that out there and see what people think.
At what time did you say, David? 1 o'clock?
Do we want to do 1 o'clock again? That's okay with the board
Um,
members?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay. Then we'll move back to the
It should be
4:30
good.
routine in September.
Okay, 1 o'clock, okay.
And we-
Will it, Juno, will it be here again?
I'm gonna say yes for now.
Okay,
It's really dependent upon the construction at the middle high school.
okay,
But until that stuff's pretty well lined out, I'm just gonna keep everything here.
okay,
Usually a room that's available one day might not be available the next day.
sure, yeah.
So those rooms have been like high 70s, low 80s for temperature.
Oh, right. That's so good, okay,
Should be resolved by then, but never know.
okay. All right, that sounds great, so our next meeting, and then we'll have possibly June 17th at 1 o'clock. And then September, I'm just gonna put a note that September will resume for 4:30. And I will talk to Daisy and Charlie about possibly, you said December and end of the year, right, for MTTS?
I think so.
MTSSB.
So that would be mid-year and then end of year,
Sure.
basically.
Okay, all right, yeah, I'm sure they'll be fine, because they're feeling the same way too, so
Great,
I
thank
think
you.
that's perfect. I will ask them about that. That sounds really good. Anything else? Thank you. All right, well, That's it then. Great.
It was nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. You too. Good luck this year.
Thank you.